Welcome, investors, to the Absolute Return Podcast, your source for stock market analysis, global macro musings, and hedge fund investment strategies. Your hosts, Julian Klimachko and Michael Kesslering, aim to bring you the knowledge and analysis you need to become a more intelligent and wealthier investor. This episode is brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com.
Welcome, everybody, to the Absolute Return Podcast. On today's show, we welcome special guest Jeffrey Seder, founder of EQB, a company that provides thoroughbred racehorse buying, selling, breeding, and racing management services. On the show, we discuss what got him into the business of thoroughbred racehorse buying, selling, and breeding, the basics of horse racing betting, a look into the advanced analytics used by professional horse racing bettors, the ideal outcome for an investment into a racehorse, and more. So with no further ado, here's our show on racehorse investing and wagering with EQB founder Jeffrey Seder.
He'd throw me out, and instead he turned around. His office was in the stacks, way back in the stacks, with just all these old books and nothing but bookcases and a little desk and stuff. And so he pulls this big book off from the back behind him, and he plops it on the desk, and the dust goes up, and he says, this is the statute that governs horse racing in Massachusetts. And so it's business and law. I don't think anybody here ever looked at it. So I went crazy, and I went down to the archives in the Capitol, and I did stuff about the racetrack finance, and I fell in love with the whole thing. In Africa for 2 years, and I wanted to do international finance, I thought. But I was there like 6 months, and I'd been in school for so long, and I couldn't stand it. One afternoon, I was in the atrium of the brand new City Court building there, 3rd and Lex. This huge, like 3-story ceiling with murals of Pennsylvania farmland. And I thought, why am I looking at it? Why don't I live it? So I quit. I went and I rented a farm, and I took my horse, and I had my first farm. I took my horse that I had at a row stable. I took him with me, and I put him in the farm stand. And then I went out when I moved in, and I threw up my arms, and I said, Tony, we're living together. That was kind of the beginning, but I had to earn money to do it all.
Right.
As a young lawyer, so I had to have a day job. I did, and I had the credentials to do it. So I did leverage buyout, and I did other things. And I came in as a consultant in a bankruptcy, and ended up the chairman running 40 stores and department stores in Southern California. And I did national textiles company and turned it from bankruptcy to a very profitable, and helped sell it out and got a piece of it. And I funded what I was trying to do, which was the research to come into horses and I knew I couldn't be a jockey. I was too big. I had no connections in the sport. I had not enough money to do it. So I thought, well, I'm going to bring them what I do have, which is modern management and science, which is not there at all. And 99% of this, 95% of those stables and breeders lose money.
Right.
Some of them don't care, but they do. And for my clients now, where I am now, fast forward 30 years, I have made a lot of money for my major clients, but I don't do it the way anybody else does. And so I can't recommend you do it the normal ways, but I can prove that I've done it our way. Anyway, so I got hired by it was 1976. It was the Olympics, and the East Germans were bursting on the scene as a little country, winning all these medals. And they supposedly had mad scientists with kindergartners, and nobody knew what was going on. So they created a tax loophole for foundations that would help the Olympics with sports medicine and research. And then they soon realized that Nike and people like that would never pay taxes again, so they slammed it shut. But I squeaked, not knowing as a young lawyer, not knowing that I wouldn't get it. I was the only one who ever squeaked through that hole. And then so I had that foundation, and and the people to help me there. And I was one of the first people working on the Olympic sports medicine team of biomechanists and exercise physiologists, and I learned a lot. And I decided I would take it to horse racing. The problem was, one of the things we learned was that the difference between elite athletes, mechanically, physically, biologically, and normal is as different as normal is from sick or injured. So all those databases about normal and disease and injury really are not enough. You need a database of elite athletes, and you have to go get that data. And it didn't exist for horses. Not only did it not exist, but the equipment to get it didn't exist. So along the way, I had to invent the equipment and then go get the data. And it took a lot of money, millions of dollars, 20 years. and a kind of earn while you learn with a few people who were interested. And I again and again, we would be doing something, and the experts, the leading cardiologists for horses in the world, would tell us that your heart rate meter you've invented so you could take the heart rate while you're galloping along, it's not right. It's too high. It's this. Turned out they were wrong. They didn't know. It was all guessing. They looked at the size of the heart, thought it wouldn't go as fast as a human heart. It goes twice as fast. And it gets down to a 27 beat when they're fit. The good one's 27 beat resting heart rate. And it can go up and down like gears. And you don't even see a difference in the horse's demeanor. And they didn't know the basic gait of a racehorse. They were teaching biomechanics textbooks, the quadruped locomotion textbooks and biomechanists, and they had it wrong for racehorses. And how did I get it? I got the equipment, and I got the scientists to design the studies, and I did the studies. We digitized it before there were home computers, before there were PCs. It cost a fortune. I was going the midnight shift to Beth Israel Hospital, where I had a friend of mine from Harvard who was a doctor, and we were putting our data on their computer and getting the hell out of there before the 7 a.m. shift came. And we had to carry it in these big discs, something else. Anyway, like I say, 40 years later, we've had number of world champions. We had the first Triple Crown winner in 37 years come out of the program. We made a lot of money. We brought a guy into the industry who wanted to come in, and he knew he needed an edge because it's a very close click. And we had him the leading stable in the United States at a fraction of what his competitors were spending. And overall, we spent less than the average at the auctions. And he put in almost $40 million, and he got back $64 million before the Triple Crown winner, who was worth, I don't know, 50 to 100.
Wow.
So that was a success.
Yeah, it seems like a good return on investment.
Failures where the guy just let us buy the horses, and then he didn't let us have any input. So they would just, it's a very complex sport. And you can't, the management of the horse, the trainer is critical. Not so much that they're going to make the horse, but most of them unmake the horse. And I could give a 3-hour lecture on the ways they do that. But anyway, the people who let us participate from soup to nuts have made money. And that's unusual in our industry. And we've had a hell of a good time. It's a run. I mean, it's a thrill. And if I can tell you another story, I'll tell you how I got my first job. I've been doing this for I don't know how long and starving to death and spending all the money I was making everywhere else on the research and on experts in the different fields, most of whom I would prove were wrong after I hired them. But so I went hat in hand to one of the biggest guys in Kentucky, who's a national award winner, breeder and owner. And his name was Ken Ramsey. And he is a real entrepreneur, I call him. He had won one of the auctions for one of the early cell phone auctions in, I think, Atlanta. Anyway, he had 200 horses. And he says, I started telling him about all the science and this and that. And I was a fast talker, brash. And he says, don't tell me that. Just make one recommendation. So I said, you don't understand. I have to explain the program. No, you don't. Make one recommendation. So I said, okay. So I spent a week going over all his horses. And then I came back and I said, a month from now is the Belmont Stakes, one of the most prestigious multi-million-dollar races in the world. You have a new stallion you're trying to promote. He says, first crop. His name is Cadiensis. And you have this colt named after your son, Nolan's Cat. And it's run 4 or 5 times. It hasn't shown anything. It hasn't won a race. Put him in the Belmont Stakes. And he just looked at me and then he burst out laughing. Because he thought, oh, what a pointy-headed horse this is, right? But then I went on and I knew I was serious. So he did it. And how did I know it? From the Olympics, we had this thing where we had figured out that repetitive motion sports or repetitive motions of a muscle, the muscle fatigues. And the fatigues in a rate that you can calculate and graph with a logarithmic function. And it's generally specific to that animal and that muscle. They were using it in young swimmers to see it went 25 yards to see what their time might be when they were stronger, trying to go 100 yards at Olympic level. So I adapted that to horses using fatigue curves. So I was no longer looking at how fast they went. I was looking at how they slowed down. And this horse fit. He didn't slow down. So they were putting him in these 3/4 mile races. And of course he was distance, but he didn't slow down and they all were going to slow down. So anyway, the trainer was a famous trainer, and he got angry and didn't want to do it and said it was a campaign performance and told everybody he was only doing it because they made him. And the Daily Racing Form the night before said they talked about this horse's that, and the favorites and the pedigree, and then there's all the jokers and the idiots, and then they listed us. And they never apologized. Anyway, so I'm there, and the bell goes off, and the horse comes out of the gate, and of course, he's 20 lengths behind me in the field, and I'm thinking, oh, shit. And then about halfway through the race, he starts to pick up. And then we start getting to the quarter pole, and he's up with it. And now he's getting to the 8th pole. Has stretch and he's flying. And by the end, he almost caught the winner and would have caught him if it had been another 2 strides. So he was second or third. Now, instead of a worthless colt for nothing for his first crop stallion, he had a horse that was placed in what they call the classic, one of the most prestigious races, graded stakes race. So the stallion was worth something, the colt was worth something. And to prove it wasn't a fluke, he went in $1 million Louisiana Super Derby shortly thereafter and did the same thing. At the end was flying, almost won. So that was it. I got hired. And we went from then. I got him there. The Kentucky Derby is only 3-year-olds, 20. You have to qualify by winning the certain points in races. And at that point, there were like 30,000 of these horses born a year. So your chances of making it were infinitesimal. Most people, if they get one, unless you're spending billions a year like the Arabs, you get one horse in a lifetime in the Derby with a chance. So we proceeded to get him in the Derby almost every year. And with 4-1, 5-1 chances, really, really competitive horses. He didn't win it. We weren't fooling around. And before we were done, we had 2 seconds and a win in the Derby and the Triple Crown. One year, we had 5 of the horses out of the 20 came out of our program, and nobody noticed. Wow. That's how closed it is and how hostile they are to somebody like me who ignores most of what they think is important. Not that their stuff doesn't work. It just doesn't work as well as what I'm doing. So, I don't know, there it is. That's a little bit my background. I was a pointy-headed guy from Harvard who fell in love with horses.
Well, clearly you're doing something right there. And with that,
for 20 years, paying for the research out of my pocket. And I got a break and I took it. So here I am. But now where I am is I've got the Egyptian that I took to the top of the Triple Crown winner had his other business go bankrupt, and he's kind of left. Ramsey is 90 and needs a kidney. By the way, he's type O, if any of you know anything about it. Anybody who might be able to help him find that type O blood kidney. Ken Ramsey, Kentucky, famous racehorse guy. But, he's backing out of racing.
Right.
So I have to decide where I go next.
And so I was wondering, what are the types of folks getting into horse racing and why do they do it? Are they just looking for the glory? Are they looking to make money? What's a game plan?
Well, if you're only going to buy 1 or 2 horses or a few horses and you want to be, you just want to be in the social thing and have fun at the racetrack, then you can expect to lose all your money, but you'll get the other part of it,
right?
Unless you get lucky like a lottery ticket. So there's those guys, they hope and they enjoy it, and they may be racing in the middle of somewhere down low. They win a race that isn't anything, they get all excited. Then there's the guys who buy the $1.5 million McLaren. They want to buy the $1 million horse at the auction with a great pedigree, and everybody says it's the best horse in the world. Most of those don't do much. But you're the guy who bought it, and you get a lot of press, and you get to meet all these people, and everybody shakes your hand, and blah, blah, blah. Right. And then and there's very, very few take it really seriously and have systems and are disciplined. And one of my close friends and a guy I work with a lot is one of the leading handicappers in the world. Designed one of the first quantitative approaches to handicapping. His name is Michael Kipnis. He's called the Wizard. He has his stuff in the Daily Racing Forum. He has a website, wizardracingsports.com. But so there's guys like that. They make their living doing it. They're good at it. They focus on one, breeding or wagering, or if they're going after actually winning the races, then they treat it like a sports team. Now, they have $20 to $40 million maybe invested. But if you think about it, if you tried to buy one of the NBA teams or one of the NFL teams, you're going to talk in $2 billion, not 20 to 40 million. So they're owning and managing a professional sports team. A lot of them are not losing money. Some of them are making a lot of money, and they're having some fun. But those are rare. That's the kind of guy I should be dealing with. I can help a little bit. A guy who wants a horse here or there.
Right. If
a guy's just doing it because he wants to wants to meet famous people and show he can buy a $2 million yearling, well, I'm not his guy.
And say someone's looking to invest, like, what is typically the price of admission to do well in horse racing?
Well, there's a lot of partnerships out there.
Okay.
The problem with that is also it's a Damon Runyon sport. I have to say there are a bazillion guys out there who are thorough rascals who will bullshit you and just take all the money 400 different ways.
Right.
And some of them have been doing it so long that people think they must be legitimate, but it's not. They're not. So it's really a lot to be careful of. You don't want to go in there blind without somebody to tell you this guy's a jerk. And then there are partnerships, but because the guys who run the partnerships are making a living, and they got to, like you're still, I don't know, some of them are anywhere from 10,000 to 300,000 participants, but it's still a crapshoot because It's not enough horses. And because they're taking out a lot of the money. I mean, there's one partner, they have someone with 600 partners at maybe $500. And they actually got a horse that won one of the most biggest races in the world. And they had a comment. I was reading it on the website. The guy said, how can I put money in this horse? And it wins one of the biggest races in the world. And I lost money. How is that possible?
Yeah.
But he did. So I don't know. The partnerships are fun, and they're a great way to meet people, be in the sport, learn the sport. But I don't think they're a great way to make money, or at least not for the guy investing. I think you have to like just be willing to take a flyer with good people, and maybe you'll get a good one or two. Or if you're going to do a partnership, buy the whole team. Buy a serious racing stable. And there's a 3 to 7 year, a cycle to it. Because if you buy a yearling, it's not going to really earn any money until it's 3 years old. So it's got 2, 3, and then the next year breeding, you're going to sell it. And you have to have at least more than one crop so you get your good horse. So, you're going to be in 3 to 7 years. And if you're good, you'll get all your money back. Or maybe a shitload more. But if you're not, well, you won't. But I have to say that, most people are just not disciplined about it. They're in it for the romance, and they don't listen. One of the things, the worst thing happens, the guy with a lot of money, and he buys these horses, and then he just manages it all himself without listening to anybody. Somehow it's against his ego to get help. He doesn't think he needs help to buy. I mean, he knows he needs help to buy him, but he doesn't think he needs help to race them. And there's a million people who tell him he doesn't. The trainers are all telling him, I don't need any help. And that's always a disaster. I mean, we had one guy who was really big, got a lot of horses, and he wouldn't let us help him. It was one of the best group of horses I have ever bought. And my track record is it's verifiable. It's on our website, eqb.fyi, not .com. And you'll see what we paid for the horse and what they did and this and that. And, but he just bought the horse and wouldn't listen to us. He did all the rest himself. And it was a disaster. And that taught me a lesson too. Don't do that. Don't do that again. If he doesn't want to let you help him, don't help him.
No, don't. And with that, what are some of the main considerations for an investor when putting together their portfolio of horses? You told us about what not to do. What's the best thing to do in terms of the ideal approach to creating a winning horse?
Okay. I think, first of all, you don't need to buy the most expensive horses to the auctions. People say they're no-brainers. Some of them will be wonderful. Most of them will not. And you don't care about which ones get away. You care about which ones you own. So when we bought them, we were at or below the auction average. So don't buy the $500,000 yearling. Don't buy the $3 million 2-year-old. It's not worth it. And it can kill your entire profitability. We had one guy, he invested $1.5 million, and about $750,000 of it was with us, and the other $750,000 was nonsense purchases. And he would have made $750,000 profit, but he pissed it away on the nonsense purchases. So don't do that. So don't set your price maybe at the average for the auctions and be patient. Secondly, buy more fillies. There are stallions that now are covering 200, 250 horses. Do the math on how often they have to get up on top there. And they shuttle around the world to do it. And so that means there's going to be 200 elite mares for every really elite stallion. So your chances of having a multi-million-dollar mare worth money are that much more. And a filly can make her own pedigree, because if she wins a major race, everyone wants to breed to it. A stallion, forget it. He not only has to win the major races, but he has to have the fashionable pedigree, because the guys in charge have got a stranglehold on what they think it means to be a great stallion. I think it's ridiculous. In fact, we're doing DNA stuff now, but it doesn't matter. So A, I buy fillies to begin with. B, don't overpay. Don't worry about losing a phenomenal looking horse. We can give you precisely the same probability of success with a horse that costs less. And the guy next to you at the auction may not believe it, but so what? So what? And if you're going to buy a little bit, and then I say we've bought major horses for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, a lot more than once, a number of times. The horse that won the Kentucky Derby this year was bought for $40,000.
Wow.
We can do it. We know how to do that, but you got to take that risk. So I say, 4 or 5, depending on your appetite. Buy them at $40,000, buy them at $100,000, buy them at $150,000, but don't go below. And there'll be a million people who'll tell you should. And then be patient. If the first crop doesn't work out, don't panic. Manage it. Because even a horse that isn't great can earn $500,000, $700,000. If you don't piss it away by making it lame with dumb training decisions or wrong entry decisions, this and that. Nobody will think it's a famous horse, but so what? It made $500,000 and you paid $50,000. That pays a lot of training fees. The training fees, by the way, can be $4,000 or $5,000 a month. So you can expect, like $50,000 a year if you're going to go after the top to keep the horse. And so what does that amount to? That amounts to, I don't think, if you're really going to be serious, you have to enter it with a few hundred thousand. Or, what I'm looking for is the guy who wants to buy a sports team and has the $20 million to do it. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I got to get out of the office. I love the horses. I wanted to be outside. I love riding. I was good. I could ride a racehorse. I could jump a 6-foot wall, and I did with a flask of bourbon on my head. I've had a good time with horses, and they all have personalities. And there's a lot, the spiritual thing's still there. I still try to figure out who's got the attitude. One of the best horses I ever bought, he passed all the tests, and then I would go and stand in front of the stall and see what kind of message I got, trying to get something about their personality. And so I'm there with my eyes closed, and what I got from him was, "What are you looking at?" And that was his personality. That was him from start to finish. Another one, we went out, and there were like 50 yearlings in this field, this huge farm in Kentucky. And they're bringing them in for dinner, and we're at the gate there, and they're all crowding the gate to get in. And this Red Sea parts to all the horses and comes through. It's this 130 yearling. And I thought, oh my God, if that isn't a dominant animal, I'm a monkey's uncle. And we bought her, and her name became Madcap Escapade, Bruce Lunsford in Kentucky. And she was a phenomenal racehorse. And there was another one, we were out of the field, and there were like 10 yearlings, and they all had short tails because they bite each other's tails. And there was one with a long tail. Nobody bit his tail. So I paid close attention, and we bought him. We named him Club Fighter. He got hurt, but he was a club. And when I was exercising the racehorses in the morning, we would go out, and these, just beautiful turf gallops for miles out where I am in Pennsylvania. We'd go out in groups of 5, 6 horses, the way they do in Europe. And if sometimes the horse you had to it was worth your life to keep him and not running away from the pack in the front. And other horses, it was worth your life to get him to keep up. And it wasn't their ability. It was their attitude. They're no free agents. Nobody asked them. And some of them just love it, and they die before they'll be second. And others couldn't give a damn. They get tired. They slow down. So there's that too. I don't know how to get that, but I've just recently, now I'm trying to decide whether I should patent it or trade secret it or copyright it and all that other crap. I've just finally gotten enough data, like 100,000 horses over 40 years to get DNA markers so we can go back in the breeding to what we've been doing, picking out yearlings. And I think that's going to save us a lot of, we're going to buy horses for a lot less money than the same horse. And now we're going to have that opportunity. That's just happened in the last few months. There's other guys out there selling DNA, but here's an example. The big one is they're from Ireland. And they did a study on 179 horses, same trainer, same environment. And they came up with the speed gene. At first I thought, well, a huge part of the DNA thing is what gets turned on and off by the environment. If you got 179 horses, same trainer, same environment, how the hell do you know? But anyway, it was the speed gene. It was a big deal. They went huge. They got a lot of money behind them. They advertised the shit out of it, and a lot of people buy it. And I was thinking, this is also ridiculous. Now, I'm a guy who was pre-med at Harvard. It's also ridiculous because, I know there are many variables that go into what makes a successful racehorse. It's not, you get in love with one with the biggest heart or the fastest gait or the longest stride. Bullshit. They need a lot, and it all has to come together. Anyway, so I was thinking, a couple of genes, a gene marker, that's ridiculous. That's like a health gene instead of a Lou Gehrig's disease gene or a breast cancer gene. I said, I've got all this data. I've got the thickness of the left ventricle in their heart and their ejection fraction. I've got stuff about their biomechanics. That's the kind of stuff that I know works. So I want markers for those specific attributes. And but it took a long time to get them. But that's, now it's very different. Very different. But I'm not selling it. I'm just going to use it as part of what we do.
So you can take a few different paths, whether it be on the breeding side or buying. But how would you've obviously have a very quantitative and rigorous approach. How would your approach change for, say, betting versus the looking at markers to buy horses?
Well, first of all, you want to know who's got the ability. Okay. For example, the Belmont Stakes last year was won by about an 18-1 shot named Arcangelo. And we put out before the race a memo to all the people that we care about saying, you got to bet on Archangel. And sure enough, he won. And why did he win? It was the same thing that I told you about the logarithmic decay curve. Because of the 1.5 mile Belmont, which is, by the way, this Saturday, is a longer race than the ones they ever run anywhere. And it's certainly longer than any of these horses ever run. So I was taking their fatigue curves, extrapolating it out to see what their times would be for 1.5 miles. And his was the best. I said, well, Ecclesiastes, the race is not always to the swift or the battle to the strong. But time and chance happeneth in all things. So you can get screwed. But I said, this guy's got a real chance and nobody's going to believe it. So there's that in wagering. When I worked with a wizard, with Michael Kipson, when they're just starting as 2-year-olds in their first and early races, I had all kinds of data. I knew their stride length. I knew the efficiency and the safety of their strides. I knew, their ejection fraction of their left ventricle. And I could feed it to him. I saw this horse at the sale. It's his first race. He's a goddamn monster. And nobody else knew anything but the workouts, which are pretty much meaningless for all kinds of reasons. And so, he would use that. And plus, he's just quantitative about it in his own way, looking at the races themselves, not just whether they won or what the time was, but where were they and what happened during the race and where did they bump and did they go wide so they ran further in this. And he puts all that into his algorithm. And so he comes out, and he's not always right, but he's making a living doing it. And so it's not silly. And he's just one of these Damon Runyon characters of horse racing. I love him. I call him the Lizard, and he calls me Dogzilla. But he's a New York guy, ran a restaurant. He's been at the racetrack since he was could hardly walk. He's just got a million stories with a lot of guys. He's fun, and it's a business, but it's not a cubicle in the bank.
That's for sure. And with that, I'm sure you run into all sorts of colorful characters. And with respect to participation in racehorsing, I'm sure most of that would be on the betting and wagering side. Now, with respect to that, can you provide any tips for an amateur who wants to perhaps bet on some racehorses?
Well, I haven't done the work on the Belmont Stakes. I'm going to do that starting tomorrow. So I can't give you an Archangelo this year yet. I can email it to you later. But I can tell you, when you're looking at who's going to win the Belmont Stakes this Saturday, one of the most important races in the world, I don't know, $2 million, $3 million purse, don't just look at their past record because they haven't run that far before.
Right.
Look at where they're slowing down. Were they coming from behind? Were they slowing down? And try and figure that out. And when you look at where they were, if you know how to read the daily racing form, it'll tell you where they were at every point in the race. And you can take about 0.15 seconds for every length that they were behind at each point. So you can calculate their time to each point, 0.15 seconds per length. And it'll tell you where they were. If they were 5 lengths off the leader, then it's 5 times 0.15. That really daily rate form gives you the splits for the leader. So you just add it. And then you can just graph it and see where it goes. Is it flat or is it going to hell? And a lot of the favorites are going to hell. It's cool. Most races, when you see somebody passing them at the end, it looks like they're running faster than everybody. They're just slowing down less than everybody. That's the God's honest quantitative truth. 95% of the dirt races doesn't always happen in the grass. In the grass, they'll plop along and then rush at the end. I don't know why. Tradition. But anyway, so so if you're looking for this Saturday, don't look at who's fast. Look at who's not, who's slowing down.
Now, do you take the odds into account, the favorite versus the long shot?
The favorites win maybe half the time if you're lucky. And then usually if they don't win, they're right there somewhere, or else they're completely out of there.
Right.
Because they get hurt or they get blocked. So, generally, if you want to make money, you got to find a horse that's not the favorite with a chance. And then if you do that well, you won't win them all, but when you do, it'll be enough of a return to pay for it all. If all you want to do is break even and bet favorites,
right.
Come out okay.
Right. Great. Well, I know what my betting strategy is going to be now with that. Prior to letting you go here, Jeff, any last pieces of advice for those looking to get into the horse or racehorse buying, selling, betting? What's the best
Breeding.
way to get involved? Where's the highest return on investment?
Well, the highest return is in breeding, but it's also the highest risk.
Right.
So it's better to be in the racing part and then and funnel your successes to the breeding to make your money, and just try breeding, which is much more of a crapshoot by itself.
Right.
And I think it's the people business. So, it's like any other business. Do your research the people you're dealing with. Don't take their word for it. There's so much bullshit in horse racing. Do the due diligence. Have they done it? Talk to the people they work with. Find somebody who's going to make it fun, going to work with you, tell you the truth, include you, not just tell you, this is how it is. I do it. Don't tell me anything. And believe me, there's plenty of trainers like that. If you try and tell them something, they say, well, take the horse somewhere else. And my answer is always, fine. You don't want a good horse. So that's why I think hiring your trainer to do everything is like hiring a proctologist to do your heart surgery. That's one of my things. Because, they only work with mature horses. They don't have the time. I go to the sale with 5 people for 10 days, and I'll look at 1,000 horses. They'll come for 2 days, and they've looked at the catalog. They'll look at 10 horses. They don't have time, and they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what a yearling's supposed to look at. How could they? They've never studied it. They don't live it. Where are they supposed to learn it? Well, because he's a big-time trainer, he must know it. Well, because he's a proctologist, he must be able to do heart surgery. There's a lot of that.
It seems like it's similar to any asset class where you want experience, you want expertise, and someone who has a system that works. And it looks like, Jeff, you've figured that out, the notorious Dogzilla. And so I'd like to thank you for blessing us with all your knowledge and experience in the racehorse business. Certainly it's new to us, so we learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners also learned a lot. And with that, enhancing some of their wagers this weekend. So thanks, Jeff, so much, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks,
take care. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Absolute Return Podcast. This episode was brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com. The views expressed in this podcast are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the views of Accelerate. No aspect of this podcast constitutes investment, legal, or tax advice. Opinions expressed in this podcast should not be viewed as a recommendation or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell any securities or investment strategies. The information and opinions in this podcast are based on current market conditions and may fluctuate and change in the future. No representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made on behalf of Accelerate as to the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Accelerate does not accept any liability for any direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage suffered by any person as a result of relying on all or any part of this podcast, and any liability is expressly disclaimed.